I have for you a special guest tonight. We're very, very honored to have him here. This is Dr. Richard I. Fine, Ph.D. in International Law. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for having me here.
We were talking about, what would be the most important thing right now to share with people. And we were discussing, the current status of Kingdom of Hawaii and jurisdiction and Principality of Aloha, the royal patents, the jurisdiction over the royal patents, and how it's kind of a gray area for, people in our audience, people that are, on the land every day. We have really good people here that care about the aina, that care about the land that feeds and also our water and our environment. Generally, people don't know how to get right to the facts. There's always this question that always comes up. Is there a Kingdom of Hawaii does it still exist? Why do we have these issues of title today? And it is constant. The burning question would be, is this the Kingdom of Hawaii or is it the United States?
Okay. The answer to that is that, and I'll put it in the following terms. We have something known as the Principality of Aloha. And the Principality of Aloha declared its independence on December 12, 2011. Let's start with that.
Okay.
We'll call that the rebirth of a nation. And the reason I'm using the words, it's a rebirth of a nation, is because the Kingdom of Hawaii existed for a very, very long time. It literally existed from the time of the Polynesians coming here, setting up land, and forming a kingdom, which later became known in, shall we say, colloquial terms as the Kingdom of Hawaii. Ultimately, what you do have is you have the United States, and we won't even use the words United States. You have individuals coming in from the United States that come in and occupy the land. That occupation throws out the queen, and I'm using the words throwing out. I mean, you actually have the queen saying, well, I agree to this, but anyone that agrees to something under duress is not going to be considered to have really made an agreement. And later, what you have is you have the United States president and then the Congress going along with what is known as an annexation. And that is subsequently followed by a vote for a territory and then becoming a state. Now that's a thumbnail sketch, maybe not totally accurate, but fairly close to a series of events that happens. Now let's look behind that and say what really is taking place. What really happens underneath this is that with the existence of the Kingdom of Hawaii, you have what are known as royal patents. The royal patents declared who owned the land. So you have two things that are taking place. On the one hand, you have the royal patents right here saying these are the people that own the land. And over here, you have political events. Now let's deal with the royal patents first. The royal patents, interestingly enough, are written. And you can trace these royal patents from the time that they were written all the way down to today, where you can go here on Maui, pick a lot, I don't care what lot it is, anywhere, and you can trace that lot back, and that lot will either fall into a royal patent, or it may end up being something that was not owned by the Kingdom of Hawaii. It's going to be very rare that it wasn't. Or that lot may have been sold by a descendant of the royal patent, at which point you'll be able to find that out. So we know that we have a paper trail from the royal patent down all the way to the present owner. Now, the other thing that we have is we have another very interesting thing. When you buy a piece of property, you get a title policy. Take a look at your title policy. And what you are going to find is that that title company is not insuring that lot against the claim of the native Hawaiian. Now, what is the claim of the Native Hawaiian? The claim of the Native Hawaiian is coming out of the royal patent. And the reason for it is because it says who owns the land. Mm-hmm. Well, we've effectively established that the land is owned by the royal patent and the devizee, or the descendants of the people of the royal patent, unless it was sold by one of these descendants. Let's take a look at what happened politically. Politically, we have a group of people that came in. They stood in front of the palace. They created a problem. They created their own government. They dispossessed the queen. They then created the Republic of Hawaii. And then they created the territory of Hawaii. And then they created the state of Hawaii. And they got the U.S. Congress, first the U.S. President and the U.S. Congress, to go along with them. Mm-hmm. Now, what land were they working on? Because, see, these people that were standing out there didn't own that land according to the royal patents. So we have an issue. Did they physically come in and take over the land by armed forces? Well, they didn't, because you didn't have a war. Right. So they didn't come in and conquer the land. They established a government over land that they didn't own. What does this really mean? Well, in a way, it all came to pass 100 years after it happened. Mm-hmm. I'll use the words the takeover. The takeover occurred in 1893. In 1993, you have the United States Congress coming in, and they pass a law. They call it Public Law 103-150. And effectively, what that law is it recognized and apologized for the illegal invasion and occupation of the Kingdom of Hawaii. One of the important points of that particular law, and by the way, you can read the whole thing, but I'm just going to give you one of the most short paragraphs of it. And that paragraph says that whereas the Native Hawaiian people are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit to future generations their ancestral territory and their cultural identity in accordance with their own spiritual and traditional beliefs, customs, practices, languages, and social institutions. And whereas in order to promote racial harmony and cultural understanding, the legislature of the state of Hawaii has determined that the year 1993 should serve Hawaii as a year of special reflection of the rights and dignities of the Native Hawaiians in the Hawaiian and American societies. And it goes on to say that they come on to say, what are they going to do about this? And it says, the Congress, on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the illegal overthrow. Now, this is important because we now have the Congress recognizing something. Mm-hmm. The illegal overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17th, 1893, acknowledges the historical significance of this event, which resulted in the suppression of the inherent sovereignty of the Native Hawaiian people. These are really powerful words, because the suppression of the inherent sovereignty of the Native Hawaiian people recognizes and commends the reconciliation initiated by the state of Hawaii, the United Church of Christ with Native Hawaiians, and this becomes important, apologizes to Native Hawaiians on behalf of the people of the United States for the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17, 1893, with the participation of agents and citizens of the United States and the deprivation of the rights of Native Hawaiians to self-determination, expresses its commitment to acknowledge the ramifications of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii in order to provide a proper foundation for reconciliation between the United States and Native Hawaiian people, and urges the President of the United States to acknowledge the ramifications of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii and to support reconciliations between the United States and Native Hawaiian people. And then it defines Native Hawaiians means any individual who was a descendant of the Aboriginal people who prior to 1778 occupied and exercised sovereignty in the area that now constitutes the state of Hawaii. Now this becomes interesting. They say nothing in this joint resolution is intended to serve as a settlement of any claims against the United States. Now nobody's making any claims here because, once again, this becomes interesting. What are we really talking about? We're talking about the patented land. So you have, in 1993, the United States coming in and recognizing that the land that we are talking about had an illegal overthrow. They recognized that the land was sovereign to the Native Hawaiians. So we have literally an admission of what is taking place at that point. Now, you have, at that same point in time, you have a Senator Slade Gorton, who said in the United States Congressional Record, the logical consequences of this resolution would be independence. So it is now recognized that you have independence that is taking place. In fact, independence really never died.
It's true.
You had independence of the land all the way through. So what did you actually have here? What you actually had is you had what would be called a form of colonialism. You had a group of people coming in on land that they didn't own, establishing an administrative machinery and an administrative bureaucracy over land that they didn't own. Well, the chickens came home to roost in 1993. So now the only logical result, as Senator Gorton says, is independence. It's really coming back and declaring the independence over that land. And that is what took place with the Principality of Aloha on December 12, 2011. They established the Principality of Aloha, whose name in the Hawaiian language is going to be Ka Moku Aina Mo'o Aloha. What is the territory of the Principality of Aloha? Because if you're going to have a sovereign nation has to have territory. What land are we looking at? You have to be able to describe this land in metes and bounds. Now, I hope everyone knows what metes and bounds are, but if you don't, metes and bounds means that the land is at such and such a place, such longitude, such latitude, and it has these metes and bounds, and this is what it looks like.
Directions, and
Yeah.
it's a
So,
survey.
It's a survey, real simple, the simplest way of putting it. Well, the metes and bounds are set forth in the royal patents. If you've ever looked at a royal patent, you're going to see that the metes and bounds are set forth in the royal patent. So you know that whatever is in the royal patent is the geographic area of the Principality of Aloha, which basically is subsuming the Kingdom of Hawaii, because the Kingdom of Hawaii has not yet declared its independence officially. They have not come out with the resolution. Principality of Aloha has, in a sense, taken care of that. Even though everybody works together, you don't have that official statement having come out as of yet. I would expect after this show it might come out pretty quickly.
Or if the diaspora finally unites.
That's right. Things will unite.
It'll happen.
Now, what happens once someone declares their independence? The next thing that takes place is you seek recognition from international organizations. And that is what has happened. Legal documentation has been sent to the United Nations Depository, to His Excellency Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, to the Security Council, to other states and nations and organizations of interest. And this is ongoing. As of the present time, recognition has been extended by various international organizations. The United Micronations Multi-Oceanic Archipelago, the International Peace Commission, the United Nations Global Compact, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and what are some of the others?
Also, the International Environmental Sciences Institute and the Global Ecological and Sustainable Tourism Council.
Okay.
We're
Now,
a member.
the difference, we have two types of international organizations. The ones that I mentioned here are actually what we call international organizations comprised of nation states. And I think the ones you mentioned are also nation states.
Yes, they're not NGOs.
Okay. NGO, by the way, means non-governmental organizations. So you have organizations comprised of nation states have recognized the Principality of Aloha. The other thing is that we have various individual nation states. The nation of West Papua New Guinea has recognized it.
And we had one of the government representatives on the show via Skype a couple of weeks ago.
That's right. And we also have a second nation state that recognized it, the Republic of Cabinda. At this point, we have two nation states that have also recognized the Principality of Aloha. What we have taken place is that the Principality of Aloha is receiving recognition throughout the world. The process is beginning. It's a very long process. There are approximately 182 to 185 countries in the world. So it's going to take time as these various countries get together and begin to do the recognition. The next thing that happens after you have the recognition taking place is you then go on to look at what is the relationship going to be with the United States.
Yes.
And this becomes the burning question.
Right.
The relationship between the United States and the Principality of Aloha is a relationship between two sovereign nations. Here, we're going to come back to U.S. Public Law 103-150. Because even though it's a resolution, it's a law. And being a law under the United States Constitution, that law has to be enforced and has to be obeyed by every state. A lot of people forget about this. This is called the Supremacy Clause. And I'm going to read it for you, just as a little reminder. Article 6, Clause 2 states, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land." And listen to this. "And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Now, what does that mean? That means that what was said in Public Law 103-150, which is the admission of the illegality of the takeover of Hawaii, is binding upon every state judge, from a Superior Court judge sitting in Maui all the way up through the Hawaiian Supreme Court. Now, what is this going to mean in practical purposes? What it's going to mean in practical purposes is what we call jurisdiction. What is the jurisdiction of these courts? Since the Principality of Hawaii is a nation and its boundaries are comprised of the land that are in the patents, or the land that we can go on this map and we can literally go piece by piece by piece and tell you where each parcel is, those courts don't have any jurisdiction over any piece of land that is in those patents. Now, I'm going to give you an example. In the continental United States, we have what are known as Indian tribes. The Indian tribes are sovereign nations. These Indian tribes were taken over. They were overrun by force by United States troops, and their land was taken. But they were recognized as sovereign nations. They ended up signing treaties and compacts with either the federal government or with the states, and they have what are known as reservations. Those reservations are sovereign nations. Those sovereign nations have their own courts, tribal courts. They have their own legislatures, they have their own taxation systems, and what occurs on those lands, the United States government does not have any control over other than what is given by treaty between the sovereign nation and the United States. The same situation happens with respect to the Principality of Aloha, and the Principality of Aloha is in exactly the same situation as Switzerland and the United States. As a sovereign nation, it is separate territory, not controlled by the United States. So therefore, when the United States says that it wants to exercise control over that territory, it can't. Okay, now let's take this down to what is going to be the practical situation. And I'm going to put it in the terms, there are going to be two types of situations where this is going to arise. One, it's going to arise on a fight between somebody who says that they own land that is owned by a Native Hawaiian through a patent, and this other person says that they got the land through a different way, maybe, shall we say, by a descendant of some of the people in the overthrow who ended up and grabbed the land and through some sort of fraudulent conveyance ended up taking that land and then selling it down the line to the person that owns it today, who's now going to take a look at their insurance policy and suddenly realize that they don't have an insurance policy that's guaranteeing title against the Native Hawaiian, and they're going to end up in a court, and it's going to be what is called a quiet title action. And they're going to come into court and they're going to say, I have title over this particular piece of property, and the Native Hawaiian is going to come in and say, court, guess what? This is sovereign territory, the principle of Hawaii, principle of Aloha. You don't have jurisdiction to decide this issue because I am not consenting to your court. And you can't get jurisdiction over me if I don't consent. You clearly don't have jurisdiction over the land, so therefore you don't have jurisdiction, and if you don't have jurisdiction, anything you do is void.
And there is no treaty.
And there's no treaty, no nothing. So consequently, what takes place is that the judge is going to go in and make a decision, and that decision is either going to end up getting appealed all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, or the judge is going to end up being smart because he's going to be looking at Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution. He said, well, right, I don't have jurisdiction over this, and therefore I can't decide it. You have to go to the court of the Principality of Aloha because they're the ones that have jurisdiction over the land. That's going to be one way of dealing with this. Another way of dealing with this is going to be that the Principality of Aloha is going to sign on to the International Court of Justice and is also going to sign on to the Hague Convention for Reciprocity of Judgments. Someone's going to come into the court of the Principality of Aloha, is going to get a judgment, and what is going to take place is that the Principality of Aloha is then going to go in to the International Court, is then going to enforce that judgment through the Hague Convention on the Reciprocity of Judgments, and is then going to go through from the Hague Convention into the United States Court, who has to enforce the judgment. The United States is going to go crazy. But that is going to be the correct way of doing it, because the United States may have signed on to the Reciprocity of Judgments. If they signed on to the treaty, and if they signed on bilaterally with the Principality of Aloha, that judgment can be enforced. The United States may not necessarily sign on with the reciprocity with the Principality of Aloha. A third way of what may happen is the Principality of Aloha may sign on to the United Nations conventions and in that way opt in to use the International Court of Justice. Now, the United States has not signed on for compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice, so when the Principality of Aloha brings a case in the International Court of Justice on behalf of its people, the United States may say, no, we don't want to be involved in that case, at which point the case won't go forward. On the other hand, the United States may just say, well, okay, we've got a problem here, and they might decide to be involved, possibly because of the fact of Public Law 103-150, where the Congress has already said that they've agreed that everything has been wrong. They might just decide to be good about it. Who knows in today's world whether that's actually going to happen. But this gives you a certain amount of the bases, and I use the word bases as plural because you have various remedies that are going to take place when faced with a local judge who doesn't want to go along with this. Now, the second thing that is going to happen is going to be a criminal situation. Let's say something happens on the land of the Principality of Aloha, and suddenly the United States wants to enforce its criminal laws on the land of another country. Well, the United States doesn't have jurisdiction to enforce its criminal laws on the soil of another country. There are certain situations in which the United States could do something like that, but that's going to be something where it has an effect upon the United States. One example are the extraterritorial effects of the antitrust laws. Gives you, we'll take the case that I litigated, the OPEC case. OPEC is a cartel. OPEC made its decisions in Vienna. The OPEC nations got together in Vienna and they decided to fix the prices of oil. By doing that, they had a direct effect upon the gasoline prices in the United States. Therefore, by having that direct effect, we could file a lawsuit in the United States because what they did in Vienna directly affected our gasoline prices here because crude oil is converted into gasoline and the gasoline prices went up. So when you raised the barrel of oil by $1, you saw it literally in your gasoline price going up. The end result of the OPEC case was that the Ninth Circuit said that yes, it's a price fix, but we're not going to get involved because of the Act of State doctrine because it interferes with our foreign relations. And granted it did because our government, President Carter at that time, wanted to suck up to the Arabs. So that was the interference. If he had more of a backbone, we might have had a different situation. But what happens with respect to the Principality of Aloha, what is going to be the effect of something that happens on the land of the Principality of Aloha that's going to affect the United States? There aren't too many things that you can really think of. The only thing that comes to my mind is that if someone stole a car in what is a geographic area that is not the Principality of Aloha, and they drove it into the geographic area that is the Principality of Aloha, you have the concept of what is known as hot pursuit. If the police were chasing the stolen car and it went into the Principality of Aloha, they basically might claim that on hot pursuit, they might have the right to go after the guy. However, that doesn't really work too well between nation states. Mm-hmm. So that's your second thing, just giving you some of the things that are involved. But let me jump subjects with you and go to what did the United States Department of Justice really say with respect to the takeover. Because we have the Congress saying one thing, but these guys are politicians. Albeit, what they said is the law. So we'll look to another source. We'll look to the Department of Justice. They're supposed to be a little bit more independent. What they say, and this is an opinion that came out on October 4th, 1988, and it was an opinion given by the Department of Justice to the Department of State, and it was regarding the ability of the United States to go beyond the 3-mile limit to annex territory going out to 12 miles and also going on to annex further territory. And if you get to that opinion, and I'm really looking at pages 20 to 22, they go out and they say that when the United States did their joint resolution in 1898 to annex Hawaii, they claim that that resolution was illegal. It didn't have any backing in the Congress's ability for annexation because that ability can only be done by treaty, and there wasn't any treaty. And the Congress really didn't have the right to do legislation to annex anything outside of the United States. So they couldn't do it that way. Then they're dealing with the ability of the president to go out and wage war. president really doesn't have the ability to go out and do that and go in and invade Hawaii. So they talk about the fact that whether the actual invasion of Hawaii was correct and whether the president did the correct thing. And they say, no, the president couldn't do that. So there was no precedent at all
Dr.
for the invasion of Hawaii.
Excuse me, Dr. Fine, and don't you forget it. We are so honored, and thank you once again, Dr. Fine, for joining us here tonight. This is an excellent interview. Thank you so much.